It was close to midnight on a sharp curve along an isolated stretch of Highway 57 in southern Louisiana. The full moon shone through the bare November trees, casting light on the grim scene. A faint breeze blew, making the humid night feel much colder than the 50-degree temperature suggested. In the distance, the eerie cry of a great horned owl broke the silence. At the crash site, the constant flashing lights of 8 emergency vehicles were giving Rookie Sheriff's Deputy Yul Gillory a pounding headache. 2 fire trucks, a search and rescue vehicle, 2 ambulances, and 3 police cruisers all seemed like overkill for a single-car accident on this lonely part of Highway 57, just south of Dulac in Terrebonne Parish. To the untrained eye, it looked like a typical case of a driver speeding down an old country road, notorious for its sharp turns and the wildlife that frequently crossed in search of food from the bayou. But as a first-year deputy, Gillory didn't yet know what he didn't know. He was about to learn. A single unmarked police car arrived at the crash scene. There were no blaring sirens or flashing lights as Sheriff Landry Broussard of Terrebonne Parish stepped out of his vehicle as casually as if he were heading to a dentist appointment. He knew what awaited him. He had been in this situation before and wasn't particularly thrilled to be back. Eager to make a good impression on the chief and misjudging his boss's tolerance for rookies, a young officer confidently approached the sheriff. "Looks like someone took the curve too fast, lost control, and ended up in the swamp, Sheriff." Without breaking his stride, Broussard responded, "Who the hell are you?" The sheriff knew most of the over 300 members of his department, though not all of them. "Sorry, sir. I'm Deputy Gillory. I've only been with the department for about 6 months." Broussard kept walking. "Well, T. Gillory, shut the hell up. Keep your eyes and ears open. Maybe you'll learn something and not embarrass the department." "Yes, sir." The sheriff halted at the roadside, where the embankment met the asphalt, and peered down. Below him, overturned, were what appeared to be the charred remains of a late-model Ford F-150. Landry pulled out a Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust Stillwell Star Bayou number. 32 from his pocket, snipped the end, and lit it with his torch cigar lighter. He casually puffed a couple of smoke rings before calling down to the crew below. "Is that you down there, Jacqueline?" "Damn it, Sheriff Broussard, of course it's me. Who else would work for you for such crappy pay and still do a stellar job? And how many times do I have to remind you to call me Jackie, you Cajun hick?" Landry loved 2 things about Detective Jackie Fontenot. First, she was right. She always did excellent work. And second, she was one of his 12 nieces, his favorite, if he were honest. He loved teasing her, and she always gave it right back. "Well, mon amour, what do your sharp instincts say?" "Give me 5 more minutes, Sheriff, and I'll crawl out of this alligator-infested swamp and give you the full report." Sheriff Landry leaned back, waiting patiently as Jackie finished her initial inspection of the chaos below. He glanced at a visibly nervous Deputy Gillory standing nearby. Gillory had finally stopped talking, but was clearly eager to impress his boss. "Relax, Yul. I remember you now. I used to hang out with your Uncle Roch back in the day. Good to see someone from his family trying to make something of themselves." The deputy smiled and nodded, but wisely stayed silent. Detective Jacqueline Fontenot, at 30 years old, finally emerged from the wreckage. Despite being completely covered in a mix of sweat and swamp mud, she would have been quite striking. Her long dark hair, tied in a neat ponytail, peeked out from under her TSD ball cap, and her chocolate-brown eyes sparkled as she grinned. She was clearly ready to announce her findings and prove her expertise to her uncle. But he didn't give her the chance. As she began to peel off her grimy coveralls to speak, Broussard cut her off. "Let me guess, Cher. If the remains aren't too badly burned, you've found 2 people, 1 man and 1 woman. They've been dead for less than 6 hours, and both are partially undressed, implying a romantic encounter. If you found any identification, they're not married to each other, but the woman was married. How am I doing so far? Not bad, bon rien. Go ahead, please continue. The tire marks on the road show the truck wasn't moving fast. It missed the turn but was pushed or forced off the road from where it had been parked about 40 yards up the highway. The angle of the skid marks indicates the driver tried to brake and steer away, but they didn't succeed. He paused for a moment, savoring his cigar and the detective's growing frustration. Landry glanced at her curiously, but she denied him the satisfaction of a response. He then went on. His male genitalia was severed and might have been placed in the woman's mouth. If not, it was found on the floor of the vehicle. In short, Detective Fontenot, this was a murder, planned and carried out by someone or something that felt betrayed and consumed by rage at the behavior of these two adulterers. Inquiries with friends and family will eventually uncover at least two things. First, an illicit affair, a wife straying from a devoted husband into the arms of her lover. As I said, the man may or may not have been married, but either way, he was also a cheater, someone who would engage in an intimacy relationship with a married woman without caring about the consequences. Was he wearing a wedding ring? Yes. In that case, the second thing we'll find is that neither spouse will be implicated in the crime. Both will have airtight alibis and will be shocked when they hear about this. That will also be true of any friends or family who knew about the affair. This case will never be solved. How did I do, Cher? Jackie didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked away as if trying to remember a name or place. When she finally spoke, her words carried disbelief. Défend pauvre Félix Bonvillain. Only if you believe the legend, mon cher. And the history, Jackie added. At this moment, the young deputy, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, spoke up. Sheriff, I'm sorry, but what's all this about? Who was Félix Bonvillain, and what's the legend? Well, son, let me tell you a story. Félix Bonvillain was born shortly after the Civil War into a wealthy plantation family in our parish. By all accounts, he was a hard-working and devout man, one of the first and few to assist his former slaves. He married his childhood sweetheart, Marie Schaffer, the beautiful daughter of Thomas Schaffer, another prominent figure in our area. She seemed to love him as well and gave him 2 strong sons. After 15 years of marriage, Félix discovered that his wife was far from faithful. The evidence pointed to her connection with a local scoundrel named Alphonse Robichaud, who was rumored to be having fun with many wives. However, the fact that he was doing such things has not been proven. Félix, a kind-hearted and generous man, did not allow himself to be made a fool of. His pride did not allow him to become a loving, deceived husband, so he waited for an opportunity, quietly plotting something and waiting until he caught the couple in the back seat of Alphonse's carriage. In a fit of rage, he dealt with the lovers. According to legend, Félix took revenge, but he could not recover from the betrayal of his beloved. It is said that he went mad and wandered through the swamps until his death. But, Deputy Guillory interrupted, what does all this have to do with our case? Even if these two were adulterers, Bonvillain has been dead for almost 100 years. At this point, Detective Fontenot picked up the story. Yes, but it's said that to this day, Félix's spirit still hasn't found peace. He wanders the roads and hidden corners of our parish, seeking out and punishing those who have broken their vows and betrayed their marriages. That's ridiculous, exclaimed the naive deputy. Is it really, Boulette? The sheriff shot back. Are you unaware of the history? Delphine Bordeaux and John Dumont, 1938. Hélène Léger and Herbert Comeau, 1951. Sabine Arbor and Émeric Rivet, 1984. Ursule Patry and Alban Flan, 2001. All found dead, much like our couple tonight, continued Jackie. All guilty of infidelity, all avenged by the ghost of Félix Bonvillain, the loyal disciple of Saint Anthony of Padua. Both the sheriff and the detective made the sign of the cross. The patron saint of lost love, Broussard remarked. 4 hours earlier. Babe and Gaz had been having an affair for more than 6 months, starting at a local high school, where Gus worked as a sports director, and Babe was a 9th-grade math teacher. For several months, they secretly dated, confident that their spouses would never find out about it. Their first meeting took place one evening when Baby was angry at her husband Luke for taking their 2 children to a local park without waiting for her to return home. Luke tried to call her several times, but she ignored his calls as she was finishing checking her latest work for the week. When she finally heard his message, she realized she had messed up. "Cher, I've taken the kids to the park since we only have an hour before sunset. We promised to go together, but since you're not answering your phone again, I'll take them by myself. If you see this in time, meet us there. The 3 of us would love for you to join us." Babe recognized her mistake, but she was a stubborn and proud woman who refused to let her loving husband push her around. Luke adored her, perhaps too much, and seldom stood his ground when she was in the wrong. This dynamic often allowed her to blame him and rationalize her immature behavior. Walking to her car through the deserted parking lot, she noticed Gus coming out of the gym. He was athletic and attractive. She was fit, curvy, quick-witted, and liked to jokingly tease her peers. As he got closer, Gus could almost see the steam coming out of her ears as she muttered, "This jerk is trying to make me look bad in front of the kids. No intimacy for a whole week." Gus, familiar with marital disputes with his wife, and eager to take advantage of every opportunity, decided to make his move. Acting as a supportive friend, he spent half an hour charming her before she got into his pickup truck. He drove quickly to a secluded spot behind the school, and to his complete delight, as soon as he parked the truck, they kissed. She insisted that it was a one-time affair, that she was just upset about her husband and needed to let off steam. Gus never challenged her or offered to change the situation. He just watched and waited. He knew that once she experienced it, she would want more. 2 weeks later, his assumption was confirmed when she showed up at his office early Saturday morning. He mentioned that he prefers to work without interruption when the school is empty. They did it. As she left, she became worried that she had left traces after the disturbance. Luke didn't notice anything because it was dark when she got into bed. From that moment on, Gus and Babe were close at least twice a week. The night they broke up, they had their second meeting in a week. Gus's wife, Nola, took the children to her parents in Baton Rouge for the weekend. Luke went fishing, and Babe's kids were with her family. After their first session, Gus and she started the second, and at that moment, they heard a whisper in the dark. "Scammers have to pay. Scammers have to pay. Scammers have to pay." Babe lifted herself up slightly, clinging to him. "What was that?" she whispered. He was silent for a moment, then smiled. "Nothing, my dear. Just keep doing what you're doing." Babe hesitated for a moment, but then obeyed. Then suddenly, the silence was broken by a voice full of venom and rage. "Scammers have to pay!" Confused and alarmed, Gus started the engine, put it in gear, and began to drive away. Somehow, without Gus touching the gear lever, the truck shifted into neutral gear and shot forward. Babe was pleading with Gus to release her, but all that escaped her lips was a muffled "Murph, gluck, gluck, Murph ... Meanwhile, Gus struggled to take control of the steering wheel, but his hands were immobilized. He desperately attempted to move his feet to reach the brake pedal, but it was futile. He felt as if he were bound by chains, rendering him completely motionless. Cheaters must pay. Cheaters must pay. Cheaters must pay. The voice now seemed to originate from someone inside the cab with them, yet there was no indication of anyone or anything present, as the truck was propelled by an unseen force closer and closer to the highway's embankment. Suddenly, Gus felt his feet released, and he slammed them down onto the brakes with all his strength. The truck resisted the unseen force, causing the tires to screech as if they were in agony. They drew nearer to the edge, and despite Gus's efforts to stop the movement, they were gaining speed. The final 20 yards were filled with the terrified screams of the doomed lovers and the relentless, horrifying sound of rubber against unyielding pavement. Just before the truck was thrown off the highway, the skeletal face of an enraged défunt pauvre Félix Bonvillain materialized before them. A horrific laughter, filled with unspeakable pain and unrestrained glee, echoed with the last words the cheaters would hear in this life. "Cheaters will pay!" The truck plummeted over the short cliff, crashed into the rocks below, and erupted in flames. The arrogant betrayers of love faced their ultimate fate, screaming as the fire consumed them.